Good evening, everyone. How you feeling? Awake? More awake than 12 o'clock, yeah? Coffee, Red Bull? Stand up and make some noise for our special guest, Mr. Kode9. No, it's just about waking up, you know? Because we've reached that day today. I saw a few this morning, people just trying to stay awake. I don't think we need warm up today, unless you want to play a tune to warm up. Do you? We could play. Yeah. Is there a track out of the ones that you burnt that you'd like to use as a warm up star jump tune? Got Remarc. Should we try Remarc? As a wake up tune? Sure. Yeah. This is Code selected wake up tune, so you can actually get up and do star jumps or whatever you feel is appropriate. Yesterday we had Martin, who selected Lemon D as his first tune. That was Kode9's wake up tune of choice. What was that, sir?
That was a tune by Remarc called Sound Murderer.
Okay. And when did that first come into your life?
Well, I started hearing those kind of tunes about 93, 94, not that tune specifically, but I was living in Scotland and I first started to hear jungle. I was like, what the hell is this? Gradually got sucked in, more and more sucked in. So sucked in, I had to leave the country and move to London, and next thing you know, you're inside it.
And so where are you from originally, Kode9?
I'm originally from Glasgow. I grew up in Glasgow.
Okay. And did you become Kode9 while you were still in Glasgow or after you made the move to London?
No, I started DJing in Edinburgh about 1991, and I was running clubs in Edinburgh. But really, Kode9 only kind of appeared around about 2000. I was already in London, so when I started playing towards the end of the century, late 1990s, early 2000s, I was playing a bit of jungle, playing a lot of two-step, UK garage, stuff like that. So that's when Kode9 reared his head.
Now, I know that a lot of people in the room have been excited about this lecture because, you know, you've almost got a cult-like following on Hyperdub and as a DJ as well. But for the people in the room that aren't familiar with you as a DJ, producer or label man, do you want to give us just a quick overview before we go in deep on each area of what the main things are in your musical life?
Yeah. Well, I suppose most people know the stuff I do most in relation to dubstep. I started playing the kind of slightly darker or more dubbed out side, instrumental side of UK garage around about 99. And that evolved into dubstep eventually. And so that's, I suppose that's what myself and the label I run, Hyperdub, is most known for. Although obviously anyone who knows my DJ sets recently or what we've been releasing on the label for the last few years knows that it kind of reaches a bit wider now into aspects of hip hop and aspects of house and you know, it's become a lot more broader reaching and become closer to what my actual taste in music is, as opposed to just being within one micro sub mini genre.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that people that aren't so familiar with you might immediately go Kode9 dubstep, and obviously you're a huge fan of the music that is in and around that genre and have done an amazing amount of work to sort of forward that. But you know, when you come to hear you as a DJ, it's so broad. You might even hear a Prince record thrown in, or I know that that's your true taste. How has it been, sort of on the one hand, spearheading and leading a sort of new music movement, but at the same time wanting to sort of express all those sides of your musical personality?
Well, I tend to think that when my DJ sets become more eclectic, then that's because there's a problem with the genres I've been associated with or emotionally invested in. Because usually what I like to do as a DJ, you like to beat match, and I've always said, and this was the case with jungle, it was the case with garage, and to a certain extent dubstep and grime and so on, that you kind of want every music possible in the universe attached to the specific tempo that you play. So you can go anywhere, but you're still in a zone tempo-wise. And I kind of feel that my DJ sets have become a bit more eclectic recently because I'm not fulfilled by the genres I've been associated with. So, and doing DJ sets that cross tempos is just me hunting around for the stuff that inspires you.
And do you think that you've, become uninspired by certain elements of that because it's too formulaic, or because you're too used to it, or what do you think that might be?
I'm certainly uninspired by most of what I hear is dubstep these days. There's certain producers who I think, for me, have remained consistent, and that's the dubstep that I tend to play. But generally, like I said, I think, because if you feel slightly uninspired or unfulfilled by the kind of little world that you live in, the little musical world that you live in, you have to go hunting. And, I haven't had to go hunting so far, or so wide. If anything, it's, I still feel there's a consistent vibe in the stuff that I play, but certainly like the certain sides of grime and certain sides of UK funky style of house that's been coming through London over the last few years, I found really inspiring again, and it's not so different in vibe to the kind of dubstep that I always liked. So it's just, I kind of, you just make your own little genre. I think when you're dissatisfied with the musical environment you live in, you have to construct your own little world. And I think I've had to do that more and more over the last couple of years.
I mean, when we were just sitting next door and I said to you, okay, what are some names of some tracks that you'd like to play, maybe to reference? Like the first six, you told me a jazz tune, a jungle tune, like a disco record or a sort of boogie disco record, a deep sort of, I don't know, that's rhythm and sound type deep house dub record. It was immediately broad. I mean, which one of those should we go to first and why?
Go to the start at the beginning, really. Miles Davis one.
Okay, so tell me about this.
Well, my dad was into jazz, and I kind of like listening to his tapes, but I only really got inside me when I started hearing more electronic stuff. Particularly the period of Miles Davis stuff in the early 70s, like Bitches Brew and Big Fun, and one of my favorite albums, which is On the Corner. And I really like this, particularly, I mean, this track kind of encapsulates the whole album in a way, because the whole album managed to synthesize influences from indie music, synthesizer music, funk, rock, jazz into the one track. So it's clearly a fusion, but at the same time, a lot of music that I hear as fusion is often a fusion of things you don't want to hear. But for me, this track has always stayed with me. I've heard it about 20 years ago. And the main thing I like about it is just the rhythm pattern it's got this kind of angular, disjointed thing that's a consistent line through a lot of the music I've always enjoyed, jungle right through to dubstep and grime, and a lot of the hip hop, instrumental hip hop and R&B stuff that's around just now. So it's got that groove to it, but it's also got these weird alien sounds that come from nowhere. So yeah, that's why it's always stuck with me. I think this track's called Black Satin.
So that's Miles Davis, taken from which album?
On the Corner.
Right. And when did you first come into contact with that?
It must have been late 80s. I had a period in the early 90s when I had a particularly intense experience in a club in Edinburgh called Chocolate City, which is kind of a rare groove club. And I was hearing a certain track, sort of certain style of funk tracks for the first time. Funk tracks that had kind of synths that I'd never heard before, like Fred Wesley, Blow Your Head, and these kind of drony, wiggly synths. So it was maybe just a bit before there, late 80s, early 90s.
And before we play some more music, I think it's relevant to talk about the clubbing experience in Scotland because, obviously the Academy's in London this year, and we've had Norman J today talking about shaken finger pop and Carnival, and so many people on the couch able to share their London clubbing experiences, from metalheads all the way through to Dingwalls and whatnot. But as a London resident, you're well placed to compare those experiences and those influences to your clubbing experiences in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Could you talk about your clubbing times then?
When I was growing up, I didn't really go clubbing in Glasgow. It was only when I moved to Edinburgh actually that I started raving properly. And I used to go to, there was a venue that's closed now. I think it got redeveloped into flats or something, but it was a venue in Edinburgh called The Venue. And there was 2 nights there. There was a club on a Friday night called Pure, kind of hardcore techno club, very famous. It was run by the guys that are Optimal now, or at least one of them, I don't know. And then there was this other club on a Thursday night called Chocolate City that was run by a guy from London or England, and I suppose it was a little microcosm of maybe some of the scenes that were going on in London at the time, funk and jazz related stuff. And so my formative raving experiences were between these two nights, Thursday and Friday night, in the same venue. Totally different types of music, but very influential on me. And then occasionally used to be these huge warehouse parties outside of Edinburgh called Resurrection, where everybody had their little white gloves on and their gas masks with Vicks Vapor Rub inside, and they were quite opening experiences. And I didn't really know clubbing outside of that, to be honest, until 94, 95, when I kind of went out in London for the first time and had jungle and drum and bass raving experiences, which kind of took it up a level.
And I'm assuming that your move to London was purely musically motivated at that time, or was it just wanting to try something different?
No, I lived in London for a summer in the mid-90s, but it was only, I didn't move here until 99, but since I heard jungle, I felt this kind of very strong but low power magnet sucking me south. And it took it about 6 years to work, but so I moved to England, I moved, into the Midlands, and gradually it kept sucking me further south until it finally got me and captured me and stuck me in London, and I haven't really been able to escape since. I managed to escape every weekend, but it always drags me back.
And what sort of relationship do you have with the city? Because,
hate it. It's fucking shithole. Um, I mean, it's a love-hate. It's a
Yeah, I
love-hate
can imagine. Maybe
relationship.
for people that aren't from the United Kingdom, I just want you to put into context the feeling that it must be, you know, and Scotland, England, all of the subtlety going on there for a start. But whether, you know, you were torn by wanting to stay where you're from, but wanting to move to where the music was.
Yeah, I'm actually here doing espionage for the Iron Brew Music Academy. What was the question again?
We don't have to stay there if you don't want to. I was just talking about whether it was tough moving or not.
No, I mean, my parents are English, so I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm only a part-time Scot. But it's really just music. I mean, it's music that got me to London. It's music that's made me stay.
Well, instead of going back to the influences, do you mind playing one of your songs just to put us right up to date and put us in context? Maybe we could play Black Sun or something like that.
Yeah. It's not so up to date. It's like.
All right, you know what I mean. This is from last year, right?
It came out early last year, but I made it middle of 2008.
And this
Nice
is
deck. Aye, this gold.
and this is on your label.
Yeah, this is on Hyperdub.
Black Sun, available to buy now on Hyperdub Recordings, which is a label that has been going for 5 and a little bit years, correct? Yeah, last year celebrating its 5th anniversary.
Yeah, we did a did a 5th anniversary compilation last year. Like couple double CD, like a CD of old tracks, tracking the last 5 years, and a CD of new stuff.
And unlike many artists, as far as I'm aware, there's only a couple of labels apart from your one that you've released your own music on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I released stuff on Tempa,
Yeah.
Fat Larry Skank, 2001 or 2. Soul Jazz, a couple of tracks, a track called Stung, Magnetic City, and
So with that in mind, was your label primarily a vehicle for you to release your own music?
yeah, I mean that's really the reason I started the label in the first place. I met I was actually interviewing Kevin Martin, who's otherwise known as The Bug, for Accelerator magazine around about 2001, 2002. And when I met him, I gave him a CD of some of the stuff I'd been working on. And on it was this track called Sign of the Dub, which was a cover of Prince's Sign of the Times. And he kind of liked it, and he was like, oh, that's good, you should release that. And I was like, I can't be bothered to make someone like it. I mean, it was a beatless, it's just a bass pulse with a kind of Jamaican spoken word vocal over the top. So it wasn't the most obvious thing that people would be like, yeah, great, let's release that. So, you know, I just gave it to him because I thought he might be interested, having heard his earlier stuff. And he was enthusiastic enough about it that I just felt, and he hooked me up with a distributor as well. So he made it easy for me. So it's really all his fault.
And since the label's evolved into a vehicle to release other artists as well as yourself, you know, what was your mission statement? Do you have a manifesto with the label? What's your vision for it?
Well, there wasn't a mission statement originally. It was just, you know, how do you, like, when you like music, when you hear music you like, you get a feeling in your stomach, or if it's in your stomach, or you get a tingle somewhere. It's just kind of hard to put that into words and call it a mission statement. But now, I don't know. Now the label is almost 6 years old. I feel like, yeah, I know what the mission statement is. I just want to release the best producers from all the genres I like. So that's that's a simple mission statement.
It is simple. That like in the lecture with Martin yesterday, and also talking to Flying Lotus earlier, saying one thing that is common amongst artists that I like is that they have their own sound, and I think that's also applicable to your label. Is that although I couldn't say Hyperdub is a this or that label in terms of genre, it definitely has a texture and a sound that people immediately know whether a record would fit or not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a particularly eclectic label, because I think there is a consistency. Although I'm still working out what that consistency is, but I think there is a consistency to the stuff that comes out in the label, and increasingly I'm starting to think that actually it's kind of nice. Maybe it's just science fiction or something, but you just make up your own little genre, your own little world that cuts across your favorite genres. So it kind of joins the dots between dubstep, grime, funky, hip hop, house, reggae, and that's its own little cosmos.
And actually, talking of Martin and Flylo, you're performing tonight at Brain Feeder. I know that that's not the first Brain Feeder show you would have done. How did that connection come about?
Well, I met Flying Lotus when I was doing this at the Red Bull Music Academy in Melbourne 3 or 4 years ago. I met him on the roof of the building. So yeah, we just kept in contact and started some tunes together that we've never finished. My fault, I think. And because really these Americans just only spend a couple of minutes on tunes and it seems to be done, whereas, they all make really short tracks as well as weirdos. Especially the ones from LA. Yeah, hippies, God. What was the question?
Don't worry, Steve. But with that in mind, I mean, everything cross-pollinating, you being able to put Samiyam out as well as Burial on the same label, you being able to do nights with, Flylo, Martin, Daedalus, and so on. It feels like a very healthy time, music-wise, and things are cross-pollinating, and good music is prevailing. So is it a good time for you to have a label with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's very stressful. I think everyone's enjoying it that's involved in those related little islands that are connected, islands in different scenes that are somehow connected. So the reason I was laughing there is because I just got this memory of, I think Martin was talking, I think Martin had this quote about Brain Feeder. The Brain Feeder crew, he described them as the Muppets. Like the Muppets, everyone's kind of different creature of some kind. Everyone's coming from a slightly different world.
You set me up with a great question there.
Which Muppet am I?
Yeah.
I don't know, but he was right when he said Gaslamp Killer was Animal.
Well, that's just so easy, though. That's the easiest one of all. Come on, which one are you? Oh, Willie's here. Okay, look. What's up?
I thought I was Miss Piggy. I'm Miss Piggy secretly. I didn't know you cared.
So talk to me about some of the other artists that you've signed and released over the last 5 years on Hyperdub, because it really is quite diverse.
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously the most famous one is Burial.
All right, so let's go there for a minute. I mean, did you ever anticipate for a second when you went to put that record out that it would be so phenomenally successful?
Well, we were kind of scared it would not sell 500. So, no. I mean, mainly because we hadn't put an album out before, so it was like, okay, we're going into new territory here. We're selling 500 10 inches at the time, so it's like taking a step forward. So you tread tentatively. Didn't really have any ambition for the label, so yeah, obviously the burial stuff went down very well, and it was just one surprise after another surprise. So Burial was the first artist that I released on the label who wasn't myself and Spaceape.
How many records did that sell, that album?
Well, the first one,
Yeah.
sold 30 or 40,000 of the CD. 5 to 10,000 of the vinyl. A lot more.
Ballpark.
More.
Yeah. Okay. And so, just to put it in context for us or people that don't run a label at the moment, what for the average artist, specialist music artist, if you like, what would you anticipate selling on a good day?
Yeah, I mean, we mostly release 12 inches, and they do generally 1,200 to 3,500. Which 10 years ago, 15 years ago is a joke, to be honest, because I know, like, for example, drum and bass in the 90s, house music, techno in the 90s, you triple that, quadruple it, and more. Big dance records. Someone could live off the record sales, whereas that's a very rare phenomenon, I think, in underground music these days. So, I think we're all having fun, but things are very different from the 90s, I think, when, clearly what's happened is there's been a rock music, indie music resurgence. And, the idea of a faceless electronic music producer is kind of slightly out of vogue generally these days.
Don't you feel that cycle is coming back now at this point?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced it is actually.
But talking,
I think we're still losing out to guitars.
Right. Okay. But I mean, talking of faceless, how do you explain pretty much little or no press, absolutely no presence, a faceless producer, 30,000 first record, and that's not a bad look for an independent record label that needs to survive.
Yeah, no, I mean it's certainly helped the label survive. It means the label doesn't have to care whether other producers' records sell or not, which is obviously great. You don't have to use business to make aesthetic decisions. But Burial really still is an exception. He's like, people try and sound like him. They don't. Nobody quite sounds like him. Nobody quite has that level of emotion packed into the tracks. And since Burial, there's been a spate of, people trying to do the faceless thing, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't wash for me. It seems a bit contrived. Whereas the unique thing about Burial was, it's even no matter how much cynicism his anonymity seemed to create amongst people who just didn't trust that it wasn't a marketing ploy. It was just naive, innocent desire not to be in the spotlight or known for anything apart from his music. What was the question?
Well, I mean, I remember when that record was nominated for a Mercury,
Yeah.
and I remember, opening the Sun newspaper. If you're not from the UK, the Sun newspaper is a tabloid here that has the highest circulation beyond, I think, pretty much any other paper. And, on page 3 or something, or page 5, it was like, who is Burial? Which, the mission to unmask Burial. What was that whole time like for you as label manager? Were people phoning you up from tabloid newspapers?
It was pretty horrible, actually. That track, Black Sun, actually came off the back of a burnt copy of the Sun newspaper.
Wow.
it was just annoying, like really annoying, irritating. The journalist who was involved with that was Scottish. It was particularly embarrassing. I was burning kilts, left, right, and centre. Yeah, it was just really irritating more than anything. It's like, you know, all the guy wants to do is have a quiet life. And it's not as if he's a politician or Paris Hilton. You know, someone who's actively seeking attention. He's definitely not Paris Hilton, just in case somebody thinks that was a hint into his true identity. Strange thought. Yeah, really irritating, and it makes you kind of recoil and close in, like close down the ranks, and really just makes you want to hide, basically, then not let anyone into your kind of not speak to anyone, not speak to the press at all, not tell anyone anything, be really secret about everything. So it's not, I don't think it's a particularly healthy reaction to have.
I mean, it is quite rare for an independent record label to have sales like that. So if you had like hostile bids from people and people trying to sign, or I mean, I guess he's the kind of character that's interested in staying loyal to you anyway. So
yeah, to be honest, he's not bothered. He's just not really bothered. He's just, living, getting on with his life. And I think he did have a few approaches through the back door, MySpace and so on. Nothing came through me. I think I sniffed out a couple of people and, put the shutters up.
yeah. Well, do you want to play us I mean, it can be Burial, anyone else on the label. Have you got another track from Hyperdub that you like to play right now?
We should probably play some Burial. So this is one of my favorite Burial tracks, which is the first track off his first album. The track's called Distant Lights. Burial, Distant Lights off the first Burial album, also on the Hyperdub anniversary compilation.
And that compilation is a great start if you haven't got any Hyperdub, because is that the comp there? There's Darkstar, Samiyam, Fly Low, Burial, Cooly G, Zomby, Martin, Ikonika, Joker. What about some future people that you're going to be releasing?
Well, the next, we've just released a couple of tracks by new artist to Hyperdub, although actually quite well established artist, a guy called Danjah, grime producer who's, right up there with Wiley as one of the most well-known and best grime producers. So we've just done a 12 from him. We've got another 12 coming in a few months. And some tracks by another kind of or part-time grime producer, part-time funky producer called Scratcha, goes under the name DVA, who does the breakfast shows on Rinse FM. Should I play some of those?
Yeah, sure.
I'll just play quick snippets. This is the Scratch a DVA track called Natty.
Terror Danger, right?
Yeah, he's always been one of my favorite drum producers, like rhythm producers. And this is the next, that's the last two releases, Natty and Acid. Thank you. And the next release is by a young guy, I think he's 18 or 19, from Detroit, called Kyle Hall. We've got 12 coming from him in a few weeks, which is 2 tracks. One's called You Know What I Feel, the other one's called K-Chunk.
It feels to me like you're really supportive of extra young producers as well, you know, with and new producers like Ikonika, Cooly G, and obviously Carl is super young. How do you find the people, and you know, do you feel like you want to put them on before they're ready, or do you just make sure that everything's up to a certain standard before you release it?
I don't know. I'm not so interested in releasing music by people that are ready.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Someone's releasing, release loads of music, releasing on loads of labels. Great. You know, good luck to them. But for some reason, I'm not, I don't know what the function of Hyperdub is, but I'm not sure it's,
Well,
I'm not sure that's its main function, to release people who are already releasing lots of stuff. Although, to completely contradict what I've just said, obviously Danjah's been releasing stuff for about 10 years.
No, that's cool. I just think it's inspiring, you know, the fact that you are so encouraging of brand new talent from wherever, from Detroit, from London, from wherever. And, you know, you're willing to put out records by 18, 19-year-old producers that no one's heard of yet, because people trust you as a tastemaker with your label. And, you know, it's encouraging to everyone in the room. I think everyone will agree with that. Yeah,
I mean, the guy who's helping me run the label now, a guy called Marcus, has got amazing taste, amazing A&R, great ears. And, you know, it was him that introduced me to Kyle Hall. And so I think we kind of work quite well together in that respect. Let me just play a bit of this track. Just need to check it's the right one. Not sure which side to play. So this one's called You Know What I Feel.
Nice, thank you for the little preview, future Hyperdub preview. Now, I've got to say, I do not know many label heads / DJ / musical visionaries that have also got a PhD and have written a book. So,
Do now.
I do now. What's your PhD in? Are you Dr. Kode?
Yeah, it was in philosophy. It was specifically about philosophy and warfare, information warfare, and philosophy and physics and cybernetics and so on. So the book is kind of all that stuff. It had nothing to do with music, incidentally. It was all that stuff thrown into a big pot with all the music, some of the musical issues that I was interested in, not as a musician or a producer, but just as a researcher. And yeah, that's what it is.
Sorry, that was really distracting. In terms of sound, though, you are a scientist. Whenever I DJ with you, or if we have the opportunity to sound check, you know, most people I know like just choose a record that they think would be good. I've heard you use like pink noise and white noise and frequency tests, and you know, I mean, to you, the science of sound is obviously important to the level where you've written a book called Sonic Warfare, Sound Effect, and the Ecology of Fear.
I've never done that in a sound check. I think it must have been an old dub plate, and it was just loads of crackle. I just played in a sound check. I just play the tracks that I like.
There was
mostly off dub plate because it's tends for me to sound rounder and warmer. The bass sounds. I usually use like a Mala track on dub plate to sound check with, because if the system can handle that, he doesn't put a lot of mid-range in his tracks. So if he can handle that amount of space and that depth of and width of sub, then that's usually good. But those records are also usually in a pretty bad state. So that will be the pink noise, white noise, black noise.
Sonic Warfare, what is that?
It's the book.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Steve. But in terms of frequency, I mean, there is a science. Obviously, sonic warfare was something that was tested by the US military officially, and I'm not sure if that's how you're talking about it here, obviously. But, frequency obviously has a physical, psychological and physical effect. Is that something that you go into in this book? And is that something that you're particularly interested in?
Yeah, the book's basically about the politics of frequency. Right. So politics of frequency in military context of, US Army using acoustic weaponry in Iraq or Israeli Army doing low-flying.
And can you give us an example of where, in a military setting, how people have used sound before?
Well, some of the examples I give in the book, an early example, which I always thought was kind of interesting, was in the colonial period in Jamaica, there was a kind of tribe called the Maroons. And they used these horns, kind of ram's horns, called the abeng. And the abeng, so they used to communicate with each other using just blowing into this horn, kind of trumpet type sound. And so use it to communicate in the jungle over, secretly or not so secretly. But what became apparent is that the English colonialists in Jamaica at that time were petrified by this high-pitched sound because they didn't know what it was, and they're in the jungle, they're from England, they're kind of out of their home turf. And not only that, but these devices were usually coupled with the planning of ambushes, where the Maroons would basic kind of early guerrilla warfare. They'd be camouflaged as the jungle, and they suddenly, like in the film Predator, like the famous sample from film Predator, the jungle would just come alive and take the English, the British. So that's kind of an interesting example for the book, because the book's about the way certain frequencies instill fear, and the way, it's kind of about uneasy listening, or the way sound's used to create a bad vibe, which is not something I'm always trying to do as a DJ or a musician, but it's something I was kind of interested in theoretically.
So it's more about the ecology of fear rather than, bass. It's more about what frequency can do to us psychologically.
Yeah, so bass is just a strong there's lots of bass in the book, because it's just a good example of the way the physicality of sound, the way you feel it, whether you can hear it or not. It's something, you feel vibration. But there's also lots of stuff about very high frequency sounds that are so high you can't hear them, but that still have like neural affective, still have neural affects, still change the way you feel. And so a lot of the book is actually about sounds you can't hear, either too low in frequency or too high in frequency.
So having delved deep into those dog frequencies, how does that affect you in turn when you're making your own music? Does it make you think too much about that? Do you know which of the bad frequencies to eliminate? I
can't finish tracks anyway, so it makes no difference. No, I mean, it's really, I know it's natural for people to want to see the connections between the book and my music, and clearly there is some, but really they're not, it's a different person. It's a different person.
It must be impossible, book, really, though, when you're in a project as deep as a book, to separate that from your, when you're off doing gigs every Saturday, to not to think about it while you're doing both things.
Sure.
No?
I mean, I just think it's healthy practice to keep them separate. Right. Because I think if they all came together, then I just implode and like in a puff of smoke, just disintegrate.
And how long did this project take? How long did it take to make this book?
It didn't take too long once I actually got a book contract, but it took me ages and ages. It took me years, like 3-4 years just to get the contract, and then 2 or 3 years to write it to finish it once I had a book contract. So, but again, you know, a lot of the core ideas that are not particularly musical I developed when I was doing a PhD. So the hard job was translating that into sound related stuff, and not just being generally about computers, networks, warfare, guerrilla warfare, information warfare, and so on.
And not only are you an author, label head, DJ, but you're also a lecturer as well, right?
Yeah, I teach music culture related stuff and film sound design at University of East London. So I just come from there today.
And how do you find it balancing all of these different hats you wear? Next. Okay, music and education. How do you find that? Is that, you know, there's an argument that says, you know, music in the academic world or over intellectualizing music can kill it for you, or is unnecessary or whatever. What's your findings in that, being directly involved in academic music?
Yeah, I suppose the way I see academia is the way I see music. Most of it's a bit crap. The good stuff is good. You know, I really don't agree with that idea that, you know, if you conceptualize about music, you kill the vibe. If you conceptualize about it badly, maybe I'm doing it badly in the book, I don't know, but if you do it badly, you kill a vibe, just like if you make bad music or you spoil you know, you clear the dance. If you do a bad mix, you clear a dance floor. So, which dog story? Got me worried.
It is related to frequency. I think you were telling me about DJing in a festival. Do you want to tell that story?
Sure. I'm not sure how it's related, but
you were talking about clearing dance floors, frequency, DJ nightmares.
This is an example of where, if only I had people on the dance floor to clear. I was playing at some festival in Italy, and Pescara, I think it was, and really it was a festival was dominated by trance music, and there was a huge, you know, fascist rally trance tent. Everyone's like, oh. Sorry to any trance producers here. No, I'm not that sorry, actually. And, you know, I was playing, I think Plastician was playing, Carl Craig, we were all playing in the same tent. And there was a priceless moment in the middle of our set when there was no one there, and there was 4,000 trance fascists in the next door tent. And and this black Labrador walks up into the middle of the dance floor, kind of. It's a festival on a beach, so the black Labrador comes from somewhere, probably strolls out of the ocean, comes and sits in the middle of the dance floor, kind of stares at us for a bit, kind of stands up, takes a shit, and then walks off to the. But I really don't believe in this idea that certain frequencies can make you go to the toilet.
Anyway, you were saying.
I can't remember. What was I saying?
Something to do with DJing, and anyway, maybe we should play another record after that story. I don't really know how to top it. Can you play a tune, and then I'll ask you if you've got any questions too. Can you play one of yours?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, well, I was going to say this is one of the few tracks I've finished recently, but it's not. I don't think it is finished, but this is something I've done recently. It's currently called Skank, but don't know, might change.
Sick. Okay, question time. Who's got a question? Of course, it's why break tradition?
What does that mean?
It's the first time I'm asking a question on the lecture. Hey, this is going to be fun. Hyperdub, like many labels in the last 10 years, started out as a blog. Isn't it?
It wasn't so much a blog. It was like, it was a kind of mini web magazine type thing.
So you have a mini web magazine and you start posting content. Okay, what's the next step to becoming a 6-year-old successful label?
What was the bit in between the magazine and the label? Getting bored of running a magazine, not having enough time, not having interviewed all the producers I want to interview, in getting bored of my short 1-year self-employed career as a journalist, in which I would write for my own website.
So, but when did you? How did the releases started happening? How did it become an actual label?
Well, like I said, it became a label because a friend of mine, Kevin Martin, the Bug, kind of was quite enthusiastic enough about some of the tracks that I've been working on with a vocalist, Spaceape, then called Daddy G, that just like, I suppose part of it was just kind of getting bored of trying to make other people like the music, trying to get signed to another label, getting bored of that process. So he helped us hook up some distribution, and that's it, really. I mean, you get it. That's it. Everything else is boring. Get tracks mastered, blah blah blah.
And you're probably the right person to ask this. What's the hardcore continuum?
I'm not the right person to ask that, but I'll tell you what it is anyway. It's really just one way of, quite a good way of describing certain evolution of music in the UK, from hardcore through jungle, drum and bass, speed garage, UK garage, grime, dubstep, bassline house, UK funky. America, in a sense,
that's where I wanted to get. I mean,
in a sense, America has hip hop. We in this country have the hardcore continuum.
Yes, of course. Yeah, there's the boom bap tradition and soul funk. But where I wanted to get is, UK funky does seem to come from some other place, but you're signing UK funky sounding artists.
Why do you think it comes from another place?
Because it sounds different. The BPM is different.
Sure, but the BPM between dubstep, grime, and jungle and was all different.
Of course, but it's all bass music, I guess. And UK funky does have other soca sounding stuff. And
no, is the answer to that.
Okay. No, that's about it, I guess.
Yeah.
I was just interested in, you sort of touched on it a little bit before, about when you come up to a gig, and probably at a venue that you've never played before, and you're trying to work out a sound system. Is there, as a DJ that you do, is there a process that you kind of go through, or you just kind of hope for the best?
Yeah, I'm not scientific about it at all. I mean, it's really like I'll get a dub plate that I know has got a lot of bass and hope that the sound, and I'll listen to how that particular record, which I'm used to hearing on lots of different system, sounds. And sometimes, okay, sound terrible, you start complaining. I mean, really, this is what the politics of frequency is about and how it affects me as a DJ. It's about fighting sound engineers in clubs for more bass. Or
Here it says that it's the transdisciplinary micropolitics of frequency that breaks with the orthodoxies of phenomenology and cultural studies. That doesn't sound like fighting with the sound engineer. Or if it does, that's a bit of a fancy way of saying it.
No, like I said, that fighting with sound engineers is how the politics of frequency works on me as a DJ, but that's got nothing to do with the book.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's just like, okay, you hear a record that you're used to on a sound system that you're not used to, and usually it doesn't sound so good. So either you try and work out with the sound engineer how to improve it. A lot of sound systems with very bassy music, it will sound very muddy. Either you won't hear you won't hear the low end frequencies at all, or you'll hear them but you won't feel them, or it will sound very muddy because the system's been tuned up for house and they're not used to let's say sub 60 hertz frequencies. And so it's always just trial and error. It's always completely different. The only thing that's consistent is I'll tend to play similar producers' records. Producers that I know their dub plates will test the system, and if the system can deal with that, everything else is okay.
All right, cool.
Hi. I was just wondering, how would you recommend making a track with nice low end bass? Does it have to do with the monitors or the equipment? It's a little bit more technical question.
It's not difficult to do. I mean, because I'm not particularly technical or scientific. I don't think about bass frequencies. I don't use those kind of higher mid-range, a lot of higher mid-range bass sounds that are filtered and do all kinds of crazy wobbling things. I just use a basic sine wave sub, and you'll usually have some kind of fight going on between the sub and the kick drum, and there's ways of dealing with that. Sometimes you win that battle and sometimes you don't. I feel like I'm always losing that battle. So it's really getting low end on the track. It's not rocket science. Actually, it seems more to do with your ears and preference. But there's certain technical things I'm not so good on that other people have told me about certain notes that tend to translate, certain bass notes that tend to translate because they have a lot of resonance with the higher frequencies, the octaves higher and so on. And so, I mean, I tend to build tracks from the bottom up, starting with the sub. So, like you would with a house, you build the foundations and then you construct on top of that, and then it all caves in, and you have to go back to the beginning again. But I really don't have. There's nothing technical I'd recommend to people apart from if you like low end frequencies, it's really not difficult to put them in your music. It's difficult to make them. It's difficult to make space around low end frequencies and keep them from sounding flabby and muddy and not drowning out frequencies that have actually got nothing to do with the low end. So, often if your sub is too high, your snare will get drowned out, even though they're in completely different frequency ranges. And I find that in my own music all the time. It's like, where's the snare gone? It's disappeared in this swamp of low end. So, yeah, obviously there's certain things you can do with your kicks and your subs and the way they interrelate. You could sidechain it so that when the kick comes in, the the sub dips to make, so it's like carving out or sculpting out a hole in the sub so there's space for the kick. But that's the kind of question I would ask someone else.
All right, thanks.
Any more questions? Going once? Going twice? Oh, I think I'm afraid it's participants only at this time of night, I'm afraid, and at any time of day thereof. So is this book out and to buy? Yeah, and
Yep.
Are you around for more than half an hour now if participants wish to have a quick chat with you afterwards?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? What is your set time tonight?
2:30. I'm playing back to back with Martin.
There you go.
2:30 till 4.
Can you get a track ready to play us out? And in the meantime, while you do that, can you all join me in saying Kode9, thank you very much indeed.